Okay, this is going to be a pretty short one because I don't have a lot of time, but a couple of things. One is, as a result of what's happened in our church and whatever, if there are any of you that are in London, that live in London, and that are willing to be volunteers to look after some social media stuff and possibly look after a website and so on, because I'm going to be setting up another website for actual Catholics in London. And those of you that are already on my stream, or whatever you want to call it, on my channel, you know my views on Catholicism and so on. And some of you might have read it's a novel, it's a fiction novel called The Heretics of Saint Possenti, which is quite a cool little story about how these guys set up almost like a monastery for men who are military trained and can fight and yet are very Catholic. It's an interesting concept, and I think men like that are needed anyways. So those of you that are interested in being Catholic and being men, let me know. Come join us, come see the church, come have Mass with us. And down the line, if there's enough interest, maybe we can start something along those lines. I'm thinking more like martial arts stuff with a little bit of Catholic stuff besides it. It'll have to be something practical or whatever. Anyway, so if you're interested in that sort of thing, let me know. If there's enough interest and you want to get involved, let me know. If you are going to get involved, don't be a gamma. You're not going to get paid. Your remuneration will be the fact that you're doing it, and doing it well, hopefully, and in a way that is reliable. Right, so that said, I've been doing a little bit of thinking on precognition again. Now, precognition is a very real thing. I've had it happen in my life a few times, and it's on at least 2 occasions it absolutely saved my life, no doubt about it. And in other occasions it was just kind of a bit strange and gave me some knowledge about something that was going to happen that wasn't particularly all that relevant, to be honest, but so anyway. And for those of you that are interested in the details of it, I do cover it in here, mentioning in particular a study that it's called Future Telling, a meta-analysis of forced choice precognition experiments that ran from 1935 to 1987. It's by Charles Honerton and Diane Ferrari, like the car. It's a very interesting meta-study. So it's a study of studies of peer-reviewed papers relating to precognition. And essentially the more rigorous the methodology of studying the precognition, the greater the effects. And to quote one of their comments, several analyses indicate that methodologically superior studies yield stronger effects than methodologically weaker studies. So the more accurate, the more carefully designed experiment is, the better the level of precognition that you get. So, and I'm just going to read a section of the book. So in conclusion, it seems that, incredible or not, the simple fact of the matter is that precognitive ability is something available to humans, and indeed animals too, as some of the studies examined by Honerton and Ferrari also conclude. While the effect is small, Honerton and Ferrari also correctly point out that the effects of the size, or in some cases even smaller, have resulted in wide-ranging policy changes. The study on aspirin and heart disease, for example, was terminated because it was considered unethical to continue giving certain patients placebos when the statistical evidence for the positive effect of aspirin on improving heart condition was so obvious. That effect was of a similar size to that measured in precognition. That is to say, roughly an effect size of 3%, which is actually considerably lower than the effect size produced by a meta-analysis of the better designed experiments on precognition, as we have seen. They produce effect sizes at about 3.7%. So what this is saying is that the effect of precognition is about the same level as the one that was done on aspirin blind studies for placebo effects. And we all know that aspirin actually works. So this is pretty indicative of the fact that precognition is a very real thing. And lastly, another paragraph that I think is relevant that I'm going to read is, I would add that anecdotal evidence, and certainly also my own personal experience, tend to make me believe that precognitive ability is more likely in the event of a real danger about to become an imminent reality. There is also further indication of this in the study done by McCready, see section 7.4, although it's not obvious. And he and his colleagues do not refer to it in the study. I will return to this specific point later in section 7.12, where I combine my view of all this precognitive research with respect to its application and demonstration in the context of close-quarter combat. Now, that all said, precognitive ability is a real thing, and I recently got this little book, which is very, very interesting. I thought it would be a bunch of nonsense. I didn't know really what it was going to be about, but it was written in 1970, and the guy who wrote this had written several books on various prophecies and so on. Now, the guy who wrote that book read and sifted through hundreds of Catholic prophecies of the saints through the centuries. And the really interesting thing is that he sees an overall recurring pattern of basically Europe being invaded by Arabs, a great war coming, the church being totally infiltrated and destroyed, a lot of bloodshed in Europe, with Paris being completely wiped out, literally almost burnt to the ground to every part of it. And just when all hope is lost, some great king from France, but not necessarily French, although with some French descent and possibly some German descent, in other words, a European person anyways, somehow takes power and defeats all the enemies, and there will be a new pope elected. And there is also much references to the end days of the church, there being two popes and the fake pope, the last fake pope, which is, Bergoglio and so on. So there are numerous prophecies that are prophesizing that there's going to be a coming calamity, which is going to kill millions of people, and not just militarily, but also, earthquakes, tsunamis, that sort of stuff. But after that, there will come a king that will restore the church and order and justice and the new pope and all the people of earth, because the events that occur will be so traumatic, and the final, let's say, victory of this French king and the new pope will be so unexpected and so supernatural to a certain extent that everybody will start to realize God is real and the Catholic Church is the one true church. The prophecies also completely validate the fact that most Catholics are completely lapsed and that only a true tiny remnant of Catholicism is left, that Catholics will be persecuted, killed, put in jail, and only a tiny little amount of them sort of will go underground and continue to survive. Now, once this French king takes over, there will be peace for a relatively long period of time, and then after that, the Antichrist will come. It's quite astonishing to see the level of detail and the level of similarities in prophecies that were said by various different saints over the centuries. Now, I'm not a great believer in prophecies. I don't care about the end times, the apocalypse and all that, which in any case, if these prophecies are correct, we're not near that at all. What's happening is sort of like a great tribulation, a generic war that happens all over the world in various ways, and a great upheaval with much suffering, but it is essentially a chastisement, which is what the subtitle of this book is. It's Catholic Prophecy, the Coming Chastisement, because we have gone so far afield from the truth that God is basically going to punish us in such a manner that we will all revert back to the true church. It's interesting because, in essence, all these prophecies, you could sort of say they are a kind of meta-study of the future, and so I definitely wouldn't discount the whole thing. Every indication seems to be there. I've read some prophecies myself, which I'm dispassionately interested in that sort of thing, and I always sort of have been. It's one of those like dead ends that I am curious about, and I occasionally return to and read into, but I don't necessarily put a lot of stock in it one way or the other. But I'm just making myself aware of it, and over time, there were a lot of prophecies that the world was going to go into World War III in 1986. Now, that hasn't happened. A lot of prophecies that, the Antichrist is born now, in the 1960s, 1970s. I don't believe that to be the case, because we still have to have these tribulations. Then there's going to be a long period of time of peace, and then it's going to be the Antichrist. So I don't think the Antichrist is going to happen in my lifetime at all. Maybe not even in my kids' lifetime with any luck, or even their kids. I think it's quite a ways down the line. But all the other signs for the Great Tribulation are definitely there. So that's just an interesting thought. And I'm just going to put it out there, sort of like think about it. And the other thing is that, there is going to be a resurgence of real Catholics in London. It's going to happen over the next few weeks, days, weeks and months and years. And if you want to get involved in that, get involved. You don't have to be in London. Obviously, it's better and easier if you're going to be in London. Eventually, we will set up a website and whatever, all the social media stuff, just to give people a place to go. We're thinking up of names at the moment. I quite like something like Society of Resurgent Catholics in the UK or something like that. All lay people, men and women, obviously, husbands and wives and so on. It's going to be really interesting because we're basically, there's a bunch of us that are sort of coming together after the events that happened that I referred to in my blog post that I put on the blog, gfilotto.com. We're essentially, going to see how much interest there is and probably just go our own way, and we're going to get our own valid priests from wherever, whoever's willing to come and do stuff and do the sacraments and help us, we will pay for. So yeah, it's interesting times, and it's I'll be somewhat involved to some degree or other in helping that happen. And as you guys know, I'm pretty militant as a Catholic, so I'm hoping to infect other young men with that sort of attitude, because that's what the world needs. I did speak about generally on martial arts warriors in the Catholic sort of the role of the laity in Catholicism and correcting clergy that errs, that is in error. So all of that ties into it, and I think there's need for very masculine, strong, positive male energy into the church. It's time that it awakens again. So that's basically it, with a little twist on Catholic prophecy. And again, if you're in London and you want to get involved in this starting movement of Catholics, let me know, get in touch, drop me a line, whatever. But don't be an unreliable little fucker, right? If you just want to come along and be a part of it, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. Nobody's going to ask you to do anything or whatever. But if you volunteer for something, your word is your bond. You're going to have to hold up your end. So don't bite off more than you can chew. If you want to help, support, whether it's financially, whether it's with your time, whether it's with your expertise, that's great. But don't promise more than you can deliver, and make sure that what you do promise, you do deliver consistently and persistently. So that's that. Like I said, it's going to be a short one because I've got stuff to do. But yeah, have a good night.